They said no one stayed long in Gallatin Valley once the snow set in. The roads vanished, the power failed, and even the wolves stopped howling after midnight. But Emily Carter did 7 months pregnant alone, except for her loyal shepherd ranger. She came not for comfort, but for answers hidden in the cabin her grandmother left behind. Most folks saw only a shack swallowed by pine and ice. Emily saw a promise, something buried beneath the cold, waiting for her courage to dig it up. Because sometimes the place everyone else runs from is exactly where you're meant to return. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Drop your city below and subscribe if you believe in family faith and the miracles that wait in forgotten snow. The snow had been falling over Bozeman since dawn, thick and soundless, wrapping the Montana town in white grief. Beneath the bare branches of an ancient oak, Emily Carter, 28 years old and 7 months pregnant, stood motionless among a sea of black coats. She was tall but slender from months of restless nights, her once rosy complexion pale from winter's cruelty. Her long chestnut hair, damp from the snow, clung to her wool coat, and beneath it the rounded curve of her belly pressed gently against the fabric, a quiet reminder that life persisted even in loss. Her gloved hand rested on the head of Ranger, a 5-year-old German shepherd with amber eyes and a thick sable coat dusted with frost. The dog's posture was proud but protective, his gaze fixed on Emily as if sensing her unease. He had been her only constant since her husband left 6 months ago, disappearing without a word when the responsibility of fatherhood grew too heavy for his fragile sense of duty. Across the cemetery, mourners huddled under umbrellas as the casket of Evelyn Blackwood, Emily's grandmother, was lowered into the frozen earth. Evelyn had been a woman of imposing grace and sharp intellect, the kind who never entered a room without commanding it. To Emily, she was the only family who ever believed in her, the woman who had taught her that kindness could coexist with strength. As the pastor's voice faded, Emily's breath rose in visible clouds. She whispered a trembling goodbye, her voice lost to the wind. When the ceremony ended, most guests hurried to their cars seeking warmth and comfort. Emily lingered watching until the last handful of earth covered the casket. She felt both orphaned and anchored adrift in grief, yet tethered by the weight of her grandmother's legacy. Ranger pressed against her leg, sensing her hesitation, his tail brushing the hem of her coat. Miss Carter came a voice behind her, deep and deliberate. Mr. Harris, the family lawyer, stood with a black umbrella tilted against the storm. He was in his late 60s, tall but slightly stooped from years he had been. Over documents, his silver beard trimmed neatly along a jaw that had once been stern and square. His eyes gray as the clouds above carried a calm intelligence. Your grandmother's will is to be read in 30 minutes at her residence. His tone carried the professionalism of a man who had seen families crumble over inheritances too many times to be moved by tears. Emily nodded and followed him toward the long line of cars parked along the snow-coated road. In the back seat of her old Subaru Ranger, settled obediently, his breath fogging the window as the car engine coughed to life. The drive to the Blackwood estate was quiet. The grand Victorian mansion emerged from the snowfall like a memory frozen in time, its dark windows glinting faintly behind curtains of ice. Inside warmth met them along with the low hum of discontented relatives. The drawing room was crowded with velvet and voices. Victoria Blackwood, Emily's cousin, sat near the fire. She was a woman sculpted by wealth and disdain. Her blonde hair coiled in perfection, her lips painted the color of wine. James Ellery, another cousin, stood beside the mantel, a tall man in his mid-30s with polished shoes and eyes that always calculated before they felt. His smirk deepened when Emily entered, his gaze drifting to her swollen belly. Well, Victoria murmured, her voice honeyed with cruelty, some of us knew grandmother had a sentimental streak. Emily ignored her, seating herself quietly in the back as Mr. Harris adjusted his spectacles and began reading. One by one, the relatives leaned forward in greedy anticipation. The mansion went to James, the summer home by Flathead Lake to Victoria. Portfolios, trusts, and investments, each name met with murmurs of approval. Emily waited without hope. She had learned long ago that expectation often led to disappointment. And to my granddaughter, Emily Carter, Mr. Harris read finally, I leave my cabin property in Willow Creek, including all contents therein, along with a monthly maintenance stipend of $2,000. The room fell silent for a beat before laughter rippled through it. The hunting shack, James snorted. She'll need it, won't she? In her condition, Victoria's laugh was sharp as glass. How fitting. The poor girl gets a poor house. Emily's face flushed, but she kept her eyes lowered. Ranger gave a low growl from his spot near the door, the sound silencing even Victoria for a moment. Mr. Harris cleared his throat pointedly. Miss Blackwood's will was explicit. There will be no amendments. His tone held quiet authority. When the others drifted away discussing flights and champagne, Mr. Harris approached Emily privately. From his coat pocket, he produced an iron key with intricate engravings, leaves intertwined around a crescent moon. Your grandmother insisted you receive this personally. She said you would understand in time. Emily took the key, its metal cold against her palm. It feels like a riddle, she said softly. Evelyn Blackwood was many things, the lawyer replied, offering a faint smile, but cruel was never one of them. He hesitated, his eyes softening. She called that cabin her true legacy. Outside, the snow had deepened, covering footprints and doubts alike. Emily stood beneath the porch light, staring at the key glinting in her gloved hand. Ranger pressed close, his amber eyes reflecting the same unspoken questions she carried. Why this cabin? Why her? By the time she reached her small apartment that night, exhaustion had turned her limbs to lead. Yet as she packed her belongings, the quilt Evelyn had given her, a stack of sketchbooks, and Ranger's food bowl, there was a flicker of something beneath the grief. Not hope, not yet, but curiosity. The kind that keeps you moving when reason tells you to stop. When dawn came pale and silent, Emily loaded the last box into her aging Subaru. Ranger jumped into the passenger seat, tail thumping lightly against the worn upholstery. The road ahead wound through white wilderness toward Gallatin Range. As the car disappeared into the snow, Bozeman's church bells rang faintly behind her, marking not an ending, but the quiet beginning of something waiting to be found. By the time Emily reached the edge of Gallatin Range, the sun had long disappeared behind a veil of snow. The storm had followed her from Bozeman like a relentless ghost, whispering against the windows of her old Subaru. The headlights carved two narrow tunnels through the white chaos. Inside the car, Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat, his pointed ears twitching with every gust of wind. His fur, black and tan, was dusted with frost, yet his steady breathing kept Emily calm. She glanced at him now and then, grateful for the silent companionship of the one creature who had never left her. The forest thickened, swallowing the road until it became nothing more than a narrow path of packed ice. Emily tightened her grip on the steering wheel, the leather cold beneath her gloves. Her belly pressed uncomfortably against the seatbelt, and every bump in the road sent a dull ache through her back. Almost there, Ranger, she murmured, her voice trembling between exhaustion and disbelief. The dog lifted his head at the sound of her voice, then returned his gaze to the window as if he understood. The car came to a shuddering stop at a fallen branch. Beyond it, the outline of a cabin emerged through the snowfall. It was smaller than she had imagined, its roof bowed slightly under years of winter, its stone chimney rising stubbornly against the wind. Lantern light flickered faintly behind a frosted window, though Emily knew she had left no electricity on. She climbed out of the car, boots sinking deep into the powder. The air smelled of pine and smoke. As she approached the porch, she noticed the words carved into the lintel above the door, Verum in tenebris lucet. Truth shines in darkness. The letters, weathered but elegant, seemed to shimmer in the storm's dim light. A strange warmth spread through her chest as she traced the engraving with her gloved fingers. Her grandmother had insisted she study Latin in college, something Emily had always considered an eccentric whim. Now it felt like a message meant for her alone. The iron key in her pocket was freezing to the touch. She fitted it into the lock and turned. At first it resisted, then gave way with a soft chiming sound, almost like a distant bell. The door swung inward, releasing a gust of warm air scented with cedar and rosemary. Emily hesitated, staring into the glow. Inside, firelight danced across wooden walls polished to a golden hue. She stepped across the threshold, and for a moment her breath caught. The cabin was far larger inside than it had appeared outside. The ceilings arched high with exposed beams, and the floorboards gleamed like honey. The fireplace burned cheerfully, though no one had been there to tend it. A kettle steamed gently atop a cast-iron stove in the adjoining kitchen. On the shelves, jars of preserves, flour, and herbs stood neatly arranged, and a loaf of bread rested on a cutting board as if waiting for supper. A rocking chair creaked softly in the corner, moving as though stirred by an invisible breeze. Emily stood still, the hair on her arms prickling beneath her coat. "Hello?" she called out, but only the fire crackled in reply. Ranger sniffed his way around the room, tail wagging with quiet confidence. He checked each corner, methodically, his claws clicking lightly on the wood. He stopped near the hearth and sat down, ears alert, but not tense, his silent approval. Emily exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. She removed her coat and hung it by the door, her movements tentative, reverent. On the dining table lay an envelope sealed with dark green wax, impressed with the Blackwood family crest, a tree whose roots spiraled into an infinity knot. Her grandmother's handwriting curled across the front for Emily. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. The letter inside was written in firm, graceful strokes. "My dearest Emily," it began. "If you are reading this, then you have found your way home. I know you do not yet understand why I left you this place when others received more obvious fortunes, but this cabin is the heart of our legacy. You are its keeper now." Emily read on, her throat tightening. Evelyn wrote of 200 acres of protected land, of 3 springing hidden across the forest north, for healing, south for clarity, and east for peace. Do not be afraid of what you cannot explain. The letter continued. The land answers to kindness and respect. The pantry will never empty if gratitude fills the hands that take from it. The cabin breathes as all living things do. Listen to it. Her grandmother's final lines struck deep. The world will tell you that your worth lies in what you own. But this place will teach you that your true inheritance is not wealth, it is belonging. You were chosen long before you knew why. Emily lowered the letter, her vision blurred by tears she hadn't realized she was crying. The firelight flickered across her face, highlighting the quiet defiance in her eyes, the same look Evelyn once had when she stood her ground in family disputes. Ranger approached, resting his head on her knee. She stroked his fur, absently whispering, "She knew I'd come." As the storm howled outside, Emily explored the cabin's rooms. Each space felt lived in, but untouched by time. A small bedroom with a handmade quilt, a shelf filled with leather-bound books, and a cradle carved from cherrywood. The cradle, smoothed by countless generations, seemed to hum faintly under her fingertips. On the wall hung an old photograph, Evelyn in her youth, standing before the same cabin, snow swirling around her. By the time Emily returned to the main room, the storm had begun to wane. She curled into the rocking chair with the letter in her lap, Ranger lying beside the hearth. For the first time since Evelyn's funeral, she felt something close to peace. She no longer saw herself as the poor granddaughter who received the least. In this quiet, breathing cabin, surrounded by warmth and shadow, she began to sense that her grandmother's gift was not a burden, but a calling. As the last wind faded beyond the trees, Emily whispered into the fire, "I'll take care of it. I promise." Ranger's ears twitched, and the fire seemed to glow a little brighter, as though the cabin had heard her. Dawn came slowly over Gallatin Range, the kind of gray, fragile light that seemed unsure whether to stay. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned down to embers, and the silence felt like it belonged to another century. Emily Carter, her hair still tousled from uneasy sleep, sat wrapped in a wool blanket before the hearth. The letter from her grandmother lay open beside a small metal lantern she hadn't noticed the night before. Its brass body was engraved with the word Pathfinder in a style reminiscent of the 1930s, its glass dome slightly smoky with age. She brushed the dust away and realized the wick was still intact, though dry. Something about it called to her a pull both familiar and unexplainable. Ranger stirred from his place near the fire, his tail thudding softly against the rug. The German shepherd stretched, yawning with a low rumble that echoed in the stillness. His sharp eyes followed Emily's movements, always protective and always patient. "It's just an old lamp, boy," she whispered, though her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for a match. When the flame caught, it flickered blue instead of orange. The light spread slowly, filling the room with a cool, ethereal glow. The walls shifted in the reflection, their shadows dancing into shapes, lines, markings, and eventually something unmistakable, a map. The glowing pattern traced across the cabin walls, outlining beams, corners, and finally a section of the north wall that shimmered with greater intensity. Emily stood, her breath visible in the strange light. The Pathfinder's flame pulsed once like a heartbeat, then steadied. Emily placed it on the table and approached the wall. Her fingers found a faint seam in the wooden paneling. When she pressed lightly, it gave way with a soft click. The panel swung open, revealing a small wooden box carved with the same infinity knot symbol she'd seen on her grandmother's letter. Inside, wrapped in linen, was a leather-bound journal and a small brass key that glimmered like it had been polished yesterday. The journal's cover bore the initials AB, and inside the first page was dated March 3rd, 1932. The handwriting was elegant but slightly slanted, written in fountain pen ink that had browned with age. The first entry began, "To the future keeper, if the lamp still burns, then the forest still breathes. The light will show what eyes cannot see. Trust it." Emily turned the pages carefully, each one filled with meticulous notes about herbs, soil types, and sketches of tree roots intertwining beneath streams. One entry stood out. "Under the constellation Cassiopeia lies the heart of the cabin. There the golden key must rest until the 13th keeper arrives." Emily's pulse quickened. She looked toward the floorboards where the Pathfinder's light pulled faintly into a pattern, 5 points connected like a star. Kneeling down, she traced it with her hand. The wood beneath her palm felt warmer than the rest. She pressed gently, and one board lifted slightly, revealing a hollow compartment. Within, nestled in velvet, was a small golden key etched with a spiral sun symbol. Her fingers closed around it instinctively. "Ranger," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The dog padded closer, his tail low but wagging, as if sensing her excitement. The Pathfinder's light grew brighter, spreading through the cracks of the floor, crawling like veins of blue energy. It formed a faint trail leading to the door. Emily followed, heart pounding. She stepped outside, the cold morning air biting at her cheeks. The forest stood silent and heavy with snow, but the faint blue shimmer extended ahead, winding between the pines. She followed the light through the trees, Ranger close at her side. Each breath she took clouded in front of her, yet the path felt warmer with every step. The air smelled different, alive, sharp with pine and something sweet beneath it. After several minutes, she reached a stream partially frozen, its surface glinting like glass. The blue glow gathered here, spiraling beneath the ice. Emily knelt, setting the Pathfinder lamp on a nearby rock. She hesitated, remembering the words from her grandmother's letter, the land answers to kindness and respect. She removed her glove and touched the ice with her bare hand. "If you can hear me," she said quietly, "I'm not here to take anything. I just want to understand." The moment her palm met the surface, a tremor rippled through the ground. The water beneath the ice began to move, glowing with faint golden light. The current twisted and spread outward, branching like veins beneath the snow. For an instant, Emily could see it all, the underground network of streams connecting far beyond her land, feeding life through the forest. It pulsed with light as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Ranger barked once, his breath steaming. The golden key in Emily's pocket grew warm, and she felt something stir deep within her, a calm certainty rising above fear. Her grandmother's words echoed again. "You were chosen long before you knew why." She realized now that the 13th keeper was not a myth. It was her. The wind softened and snow began to fall gently again. The light beneath the ice dimmed but did not vanish. It lingered, waiting. Emily exhaled shakily, placing her hand over her belly. "You'll see it one day," she whispered to the unborn child. "This place, it's yours too." As she stood, the Pathfinder lamp flickered once more before dimming back to its normal amber glow. Whatever magic had been awakened had gone quiet again, leaving behind only the sound of the stream and Ranger's steady breathing. The forest, once indifferent, now felt watchful, alive in a way she had never felt before. Emily looked back toward the cabin in the distance. The wind carried the faint scent of cedar and home. She smiled softly. "Let's go back, Ranger," she said. The dog gave a low, contented bark, and together they followed their footprints through the snow, unaware that the forest behind them pulsed faintly in response, as if recognizing its keeper had finally returned. The afternoon sunlight over at Gallatin Valley was fragile, filtered through a thin veil of frost. Emily sat at the wooden table in her cabin, her hands tracing the edges of the Pathfinder lamp. The strange blue light from the day before had long faded, but its memory pulsed faintly inside her mind, like a heartbeat she couldn't unhear. Ranger lay near the fireplace, his fur glistening with warmth and his eyes half closed, alert even in rest. Outside, the forest was quiet, the kind of silence that feels watchful, as though something vast was holding its breath. A sharp knock startled both of them. Ranger was on his feet instantly, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Emily rose carefully, her body heavy but graceful, despite the weight of her 7-month pregnancy. When she opened the door, she was surprised to find Mr. Harris, the family lawyer, standing there in a long black coat dusted with snow. His silver hair was damp, and the fine lines around his gray eyes deepened as he smiled faintly. "Miss Carter," he greeted, his voice gravelly but kind. "Forgive the intrusion. The roads were nearly impassable, but I thought it best to deliver these documents in person." He held up a leather briefcase. Emily stepped aside, ushering him in. "You didn't have to come all this way, Mr. Harris," she said softly. "Your grandmother once told me," he replied, brushing the snow from his coat, "that this cabin does not welcome strangers. I thought it might make an exception for me." His tone was half serious, half wistful, and it made Emily smile. He had the air of a man molded by old rules, measured, respectful, and quietly haunted by the sense that the world he knew was fading. They sat by the fire while Ranger settled beside Emily's chair, his head resting protectively against her leg. "Mr. Harris opened the briefcase, spreading a stack of papers across the table maps. Legal deeds and certificates stamped with state seals. "These," he explained, tapping the documents, "concern your grandmother's conservation easement. This property, 207 acres to be exact, is protected land. You own the water rights to 3 natural springs, and under the trust's terms, you'll receive steady income from the preservation fund." "It's quite a legacy, Miss Carter." Emily studied the maps. Blue lines marked the springs like arteries running through the forest. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It's more than that," Harris said, his tone softening. "Your grandmother believed the land itself was alive. She used to say it chooses its caretaker, not the other way around." He closed the folder, meeting Emily's gaze. "She also warned that outsiders shouldn't meddle here. The cabin has rules of its own kind." Emily's expression turned thoughtful. She remembered the night the water had glowed beneath the ice. "I think she was right," she said quietly. Before Harris could reply, the distant sound of tires crunching snow echoed through the stillness. Ranger stood, ears pricked. A black Range Rover appeared at the edge of the clearing, its headlights slicing through the pale light. Emily's stomach tightened, not from pain, but from recognition. 2 figures stepped out, Victoria Blackwood, elegant, in a fur-lined coat, and James Ellery, tall and angular, his dark hair slicked back, the gleam of expensive confidence in his cold blue eyes. They looked out of place here like marble statues dropped in the middle of a forest. Emily, Victoria called, smiling in that brittle way that meant trouble. "We were in the area and thought we'd stop by." James followed her up the porch, his gloved hands tucked casually into his coat pockets. "I see the cabin's still standing," he remarked dryly. Emily folded her arms. "What do you want?" Victoria exchanged a quick look with James before pulling a glossy folder from her bag. "You've heard of the new Big Sky Resort project, haven't you? It's expanding into this region. There's a proposal to develop luxury lodges and ecotourism trails through Gallatin Forest. Your land sits right in the middle of it. They're offering a buyout, $3 million. Emily stared at the papers, her pulse quickening. Mr. Harris's face hardened. "Miss Carter," he said firmly, "you're under no obligation." But Victoria cut him off, her tone turning sugary. "Think about it, Emily. You could raise your child anywhere. Why stay in this wilderness?" Emily looked past them out to the trees heavy with snow. "Because this wilderness is my home," she said. James smirked. "So you'd rather live in isolation than accept a fortune?" "Some things," Emily replied evenly, "aren't for sale." For a moment, no one spoke. The air itself seemed to tighten. Then, as if echoing her words, a low rumble rolled across the mountains. The wind shifted, and the first flakes of a new storm began to fall. Within minutes, the weather turned violent. Snow lashed sideways, and the trees groaned under the wind's fury. Harris urged the cousins to leave before the road closed. They departed quickly, their luxury SUV disappearing into the whiteout. By the time Harris finished securing his papers, the wind was screaming against the cabin walls. Suddenly, a dull heat radiated from the stone beside the fireplace, the carved guardian rock Evelyn had placed there decades ago. Emily touched it and flinched. It was hot to the skin, pulsing with energy like a heartbeat. Ranger barked sharply, pacing near her feet. Then a sharp pain struck low in Emily's abdomen. She gasped, gripping the table. The contraction passed, but another followed stronger. Her vision blurred. "No. Oh, not yet," she whispered. "Mr. Harris was instantly at her side, his calm demeanor cracking into worry. "You need help. The phone lines are down." Emily gasped. "There's a bell on the mantel." She pointed to a silver bell engraved with vines. Harris handed it to her, and she rang it once. The sound wasn't loud, it was clear, almost crystalline, and seemed to carry through the storm like light through glass. 15 minutes later, a lantern's glow appeared through the blizzard. A woman pushed through the snowdrift toward the porch. Maggie Sullivan, the town's midwife. She was in her late 50s, with windburned cheeks, streaks of gray in her auburn hair, and sharp hazel eyes that saw both pain and truth. Her coat was patched, her hands steady. "Let me in, child," she called. "The mountain doesn't wait." Within minutes, Maggie was tending to Emily by the fire, mixing crushed herbs with water from a flask. "From the northern spring," she explained softly. "Your grandmother swore by it." The aroma of mint and sage filled the air as she pressed the cool cloth to Emily's forehead. The contractions eased gradually. Maggie checked her pulse and nodded. "You're not in labor yet," she said gently. "The storm just scared your body into thinking you were." Emily exhaled shakily, tears of relief brimming. "Thank you." Maggie gave a small smile. "Thank your grandmother. She's the one who told me where to find you if the silver bell ever rang." Outside, the blizzard roared, but inside the cabin, the fire glowed steadily, warm, defiant, alive. Emily drifted to sleep beside Ranger, her hand resting over her unborn child, while the forest's ancient heartbeat pulsed softly beneath the snow. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world wrapped in silence. Snow lay heavy on the pines around Gallatin Range, each branch bowed under the weight of purity. The cabin stood firm, smoke curling from its chimney into the pale blue morning sky. Inside, Emily Carter moved carefully between beams of sunlight that pierced the frosted windows. Her body still carried the ache of the night's ordeal, but her spirit felt renewed, sharpened by something ancient and quiet that had awakened within her. Ranger, her loyal German shepherd, lay sprawled across the hearthrug, his coat gleaming gold and black in the firelight. His amber eyes followed Emily with an almost human attentiveness, as though he too knew that something had shifted in the air. A knock came at the door, 3 deliberate taps. Ranger barked once, low and controlled. Emily opened the door to find Mr. Harris, his expression serious but touched by relief. He had aged visibly since his last visit. His neatly combed gray hair was damp with melted snow, and his shoulders drooped beneath the weight of his wool coat. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said, stepping inside. "I thought you might like to hear the news directly." He warmed his hands by the fire before speaking. "The court has ruled in your favor," he said finally. "The claims from Victoria and James have been dismissed. The judge upheld your grandmother's will completely." His eyes softened. "There's also a restraining order. They're not to approach you or this property again." Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "So it's over," she whispered. "For now, yes," Harris said. "Though I suspect your grandmother's foresight was the true victory here. The conservation laws she tied to this land make it nearly impossible for developers to touch it. Even the Big Sky Resort investors withdrew their interest once they realized you control the water rights. No water, no resort." He handed her a slim envelope. "Inside are the court documents and final trust certificates. Keep them safe." "I imagine Evelyn would have liked this outcome." Emily smiled faintly. "She planned every step before I even knew the path existed." When Harris left, the world felt lighter. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the windows, and the fire crackled with steady warmth. Emily sat at the table, turning the envelope in her hands. Her gaze fell to the Pathfinder lamp resting nearby. Its flame, though dim, glowed steadily. She tilted her head. "You're not finished yet, are you?" she murmured. That night, as the first full moon of winter rose, Emily awoke to find the Pathfinder burning bright blue again. The room shimmered with a faint living glow. The light stretched toward the far wall, toward a section of oak paneling beneath the stairs she had never noticed before. With a sense of quiet purpose, she followed it. Ranger rose too, padding beside her, his tail low but wagging. The beam of light converged on a small brass keyhole hidden behind the baseboard. Emily remembered the golden key she had found weeks earlier and fetched it from her locket. When she turned it, a soft click echoed through the cabin, followed by the faint scrape of hidden gears. The panel slid open, revealing a narrow in-wall safe. A faint inscription above it read, "For the keeper who sees the end of the storm." She hesitated, then typed a date into the keypad, the day Maggie had come through the blizzard to save her and her unborn child. The lock clicked open. Inside, she found several folders bound in blue ribbon, a small wooden box, and a sealed letter marked, "To my successor." Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. It was Evelyn's handwriting, strong looping, deliberate. Emily, if you are reading this, then you have fulfilled your first trial as keeper. Within this safe lies what remains of our earthly wealth shares in the Blackwood Timber Cooperative partial ownership of the Northern Spring Company and patents for 3 medicinal formulas derived from our herbs. These are not riches to flaunt, but tools to preserve. Use them only for the land, the water, and the ones who come after you. Emily opened the wooden box and found neat stacks of old stock certificates in a small glass vial of clear water labeled Source North. Beneath them, a brass coin embossed with the same infinity knot gleamed faintly. She closed the box reverently. As she replaced everything, the Pathfinder's blue light dimmed, returning to its normal amber hue. The cabin felt still again, but no longer merely quiet. It felt fulfilled, as though it had been holding its breath for this very moment. Ranger lay down near the door, head resting on his paws. Emily knelt beside him, her fingers combing through his thick fur. "We're going to be all right, boy," she said softly. Grandma made sure of that. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and hurried. The storm had washed the forest clean, and now the moonlight glowed on every branch like silver lace. Emily lit a candle on her writing desk and opened a new leather-bound notebook she had found earlier in the trunk beneath her bed. On the first page, in graceful script, she wrote the future journal of the Blackwood Keepers. Her pen hovered as she looked toward the window where the mountains slept beneath their white cloaks. Then slowly she began to write. "Tonight marks the beginning of my stewardship. The land breathes again, and I am learning to breathe with it. My grandmother's love was not a farewell, but a foundation. The springs run clear, the trees stand tall, and even in winter there is life waiting beneath the snow. I will protect it for her, for my child, for all who come after." When she finished, she signed her name, Emily Carter, 13th Keeper of the Blackwood Line. Ranger lifted his head and gave a single low bark, as if to seal the vow. Emily smiled, tears glimmering under the candlelight. She placed the pen beside the book, her hand resting gently on her rounded belly. Outside, Bozeman stirred beneath a soft sunrise. The storm clouds had cleared, revealing a sky painted in fragile pinks and golds. As light spilled across the valley, Emily stepped onto the porch, the snow crunching beneath her boots. Ranger stood beside her, his breath forming mist in the cold air. She looked toward the endless stretch of forest, its edges glowing in morning light, and whispered, "We'll keep it safe." The wind carried her words into the trees, and for a moment she could have sworn the forest whispered back. Sometimes miracles don't come as thunder or lightning. They come as silence after the storm. They come as a whisper in your heart telling you to hold on a little longer, to trust that there is meaning in the struggle and purpose in the pain. For Emily Carter, her miracle wasn't gold or fame. It was faith that even in the coldest winter, God plants something sacred beneath the snow. Maybe that's the same miracle waiting for you too. Maybe the broken places in your life aren't endings, but doorways to something holy. The same God who breathed life into the mountains still breathes strength into you quietly, faithfully every single day. So if you're watching this now, remember, you are never too lost to be found, never too broken to be healed, and never too late to start again. If this story touched your heart, please share it so someone else might find hope too. Leave a comment below about a moment when you felt God's presence in your life. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, miracles, and redemption. May the Lord bless you, guide you, and remind you that every storm ends, and beyond the snow, light always returns. God bless you all.